When Michael Jordan walked into Grace Community Church with his 2 young children, he wasn't looking for special treatment. He just wanted what every father wants, a place where his family could worship and belong. But Pastor Harrison Webb looked right past them, like they were invisible. For months, the greatest basketball player who ever lived sat in the back row, ignored and unwelcome, while his children watched their father get treated like he didn't matter. Then one Sunday, everything changed. What Michael did next left the entire congregation speechless and taught the world an unforgettable lesson about dignity and grace. But here's what will shock you most. Would this small-town church have treated Michael differently if they knew he was famous from day one? And when his true identity was finally revealed, would they learn what real Christian love looks like, or prove they only cared about him because of who he was? Before we dive into this incredible true story that will change how you think about faith, respect, and standing up for what's right, make sure to hit that like button and comment below to let me know where you're watching from. Now let me take you back to that first Sunday morning when a champion walked through church doors, hoping to find acceptance. The morning sun painted golden stripes across the wooden floors of Grace Community Church. Pastor Harrison Webb straightened his tie for the 3rd time and checked his watch. 9:15. In 15 minutes, his congregation would fill these familiar pews for Sunday worship. Harrison had been the pastor here for 12 years. He knew every face that would walk through those doors. Mrs. Patterson would sit in the 2nd row, right side, just like she had for 30 years. The Johnson family would claim their usual spot near the back, close to the door in case little Tommy got fussy. The Hendersons from Charlotte were visiting today. He'd received their call yesterday and prepared a special welcome. The church wasn't large, maybe 200 people on a good Sunday, but it was home. These people trusted him to guide them, to speak God's word, to care for their souls. Harrison took that responsibility seriously. Pastor Webb. Mrs. Coleman's voice called from the kitchen. Ruth Coleman had been preparing fellowship meals at Grace Community longer than Harrison had been alive. Her warm smile and generous spirit made everyone feel welcome. "Yes, Mrs. Coleman. Coffee's ready and I've got fresh cookies for after service. Expecting anyone special today?" Harrison nodded. "The Henderson family from Charlotte. First-time visitors. I want to make sure they feel at home." "Of course, Pastor. I'll make sure to introduce myself." Harrison walked to the front window and looked out at the parking lot. Cars were starting to arrive. He recognized each one. There was Mr. Pritchard's black Mercedes. Harold never missed a Sunday and never forgot to mention his weekly donation. The Morrison family's minivan pulled up, kids already arguing in the back seat. Everything was exactly as it should be. At 9:25, Harrison took his place at the front of the sanctuary. The organ played softly as people found their seats. Quiet conversations filled the air. Children whispered to their parents. Teenagers texted on their phones until stern looks made them put the devices away. Harrison was reviewing his sermon notes when the back doors opened. A tall man entered with 2 children. The man wore a navy blue suit that fit him perfectly. His posture was straight, confident. The little girl beside him had her hair in neat braids with bright yellow ribbons. She wore a white dress with yellow flowers. The boy, maybe 10 years old, wore a gray suit that made him look very grown up. They moved quietly down the center aisle, looking for a place to sit. The man's eyes were kind but serious. He held his daughter's hand gently while his son walked close beside them. Harrison noticed them, of course. In a church this size, everyone noticed newcomers. But something made him look away quickly. He busied himself with his notes, suddenly very interested in his sermon about loving your neighbor. The family found seats in the back, 3 rows from the rear. The man helped his daughter with her coat, then sat down between his children. He opened a hymnal and showed them the first song. The little girl pointed at the words, sounding them out quietly. Around them, other church members glanced back curiously. Some smiled politely. Others whispered behind their hands. Harrison could feel the shift in the room's energy. Change always made people uncomfortable. Even small changes like new faces in familiar pews. "Good morning, Grace community." Harrison's voice boomed across the sanctuary. The congregation responded with their usual enthusiasm. "What a beautiful day the Lord has made." The service began like every Sunday. They sang Amazing Grace, the church's signature song. Harrison noticed the new family singing along. The man had a strong, clear voice. His children tried to follow the melody, looking up at their father for guidance. When it came time for announcements, Harrison stepped forward with his warmest smile. This was his favorite part, welcoming visitors and making them feel like family. "Before we continue," he said, "I'd like to recognize our guests this morning. We have some special visitors with us today." Harrison's eyes swept the congregation. He saw the Henderson family in the middle section, and his face lit up. "The Henderson family has joined us from Charlotte, William and Margaret along with their son David. William called yesterday to let us know they were coming. We're so delighted to have you worship with us this morning." The Hendersons stood and waved. The congregation applauded warmly. Margaret Henderson beamed at the welcome. Harrison continued looking around the sanctuary. His gaze passed over the back section where the man and his children sat quietly. The little girl had raised her hand slightly when he asked for visitors, but Harrison seemed to look right through them. "Sarah Mitchell is home from college this weekend. Sarah, stand up and let everyone see how grown-up you've become." Sarah, sitting with her parents in the fourth row, stood up shyly. More applause. "Is there anyone else visiting with us this morning?" The man in the back didn't raise his hand this time. His daughter looked up at him with confusion in her dark eyes. Why wasn't the pastor looking at them? She had been so excited to visit a new church. Her father placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and smiled down at her, but she could see something sad in his expression. "Well then," Harrison concluded, "let's give all our visitors a warm Grace community welcome." The congregation applauded, but it felt hollow to the family in the back. They had been forgotten. Invisible. Harrison moved into his sermon about loving neighbors. He spoke passionately about welcoming strangers, about seeing Christ in everyone they met. The words were beautiful, powerful even, but they seemed to float right past the three people who needed to hear them most. The man listened carefully, his face calm and attentive. Sometimes he would lean down to whisper explanations to his children. When Harrison talked about showing kindness to outsiders, the little girl looked up at her father hopefully. Maybe after the service people would be friendlier. 45 minutes later, Harrison concluded with a prayer. "Lord, help us to see every person as you see them. Help us to love without condition and welcome without hesitation." "Amen," the congregation responded. As people began to file out chatting and laughing, Harrison positioned himself at the back doors. This was another tradition, shaking hands with everyone as they left, sharing a personal word, making connection. The Hendersons were among the first to reach him. "Pastor Webb, what a wonderful service." Margaret Henderson gushed, "Your sermon really spoke to our hearts." "Thank you so much," Harrison replied, gripping William's hand firmly. "I hope we'll see you again soon. Ruth Coleman has prepared a wonderful fellowship meal if you'd like to stay." "We'd love to," William said. "Everyone here seems so friendly." More people followed. Harrison knew each one by name, asked about their week, remembered details about their lives. Mrs. Patterson told him about her new grandson. The Johnson family apologized for Tommy's crying during the offering. Teenager after teenager received encouraging words about school, sports, or upcoming events. Finally, the man and his children approached. They had waited patiently while nearly everyone else left. The man extended his hand with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Pastor. Thank you for the service." Harrison's handshake was brief, almost mechanical. His eyes looked past the man toward the parking lot. "Morning," Harrison mumbled. "I'm Michael," the man said, his voice warm, despite the cool reception. "These are my children, Jasmine and Marcus. We're new to the area and hoping to find a church home." Harrison replied absently. He was watching Harold Pritchard, who was gesturing toward him from across the parking lot. 8-year-old Jasmine tugged on her father's sleeve. She had been so excited about visiting a new church. Her dress was her very favorite, and she had practiced singing hymns all week. But the pastor barely looked at her. "Daddy," she whispered, "why won't he talk to us?" The question hit Michael like a physical blow, but his expression never changed. He knelt down to Jasmine's level, his hands gentle on her small shoulders. "Sometimes people are just busy, sweetheart," he said softly. "Let's give him some time." But as Michael looked up at Pastor Webb, who was now walking away toward Harold Pritchard without another word, both men knew this wasn't about being busy. This was about something else entirely. Something that would test everything both men claimed to believe about faith, love, and the true meaning of Christian fellowship. Michael watched Pastor Webb walk away, leaving him standing at the church doors with his children. The message was clear, even if no words had been spoken. They were not wanted here. "Daddy?" Marcus, his 10-year-old son, looked up with confusion in his eyes. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, son, we didn't do anything wrong." Michael's voice was steady, but inside familiar feelings stirred. He had hoped those days were behind him. He had hoped his children would never have to feel what he was feeling right now. Jasmine still held his hand tightly. Her yellow ribbons had come slightly loose during the service, and one hung at an odd angle. She looked so small, so hopeful, so hurt. "Maybe he didn't see us," she said quietly. "Maybe we should try again." Michael's heart broke a little more. His daughter was making excuses for the pastor's behavior, trying to find a reason that didn't involve them being rejected. How many times had he done the same thing when he was young? Across the parking lot, Pastor Webb was deep in conversation with Harold Pritchard. Harold was an important man in Millbrook. He owned the largest business in town and gave more money to the church than anyone else. When Harold talked, Pastor Webb listened. Michael could see them glancing in his direction. Harold's expression was serious, almost worried. Pastor Webb nodded along with whatever Harold was saying. "Let's go to the car," Michael said gently to his children. "But Daddy," Jasmine protested, "the nice lady in the kitchen invited us to stay for lunch. She said there would be fried chicken and chocolate cake." Michael looked toward the fellowship hall, where he could see people gathering around tables covered with white cloths. The smell of home cooking drifted through the air. It looked warm and welcoming, everything a church fellowship should be. But as they stood there, other church members walked past them with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. No one stopped to introduce themselves. No one asked their names or where they were from. They were outsiders, and everyone seemed determined to keep it that way. Well, almost everyone. "Excuse me, honey." A gentle voice came from behind them. Michael turned to see an elderly black woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple blue dress and a white apron that said Grace Community Kitchen in faded letters. "I'm Ruth Coleman," she said with a warm smile. "I help prepare the meals here." "Are you the family that's visiting today?" Michael felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Finally, someone who actually saw them. "Yes, ma'am, I'm Michael, and these are my children, Jasmine and Marcus." "Well, aren't you two just beautiful?" Mrs. Coleman bent down to the children's level. "Jasmine, I love those yellow ribbons. And Marcus, that's a very handsome tie you're wearing." Both children beamed under her attention. This was what they had expected church to feel like. "Would you like to join us for fellowship lunch?" Mrs. Coleman asked. "I made my famous fried chicken, and I think there might be some chocolate cake left if certain little ones promise to eat their vegetables first." Jasmine giggled. "I love vegetables." "Well, most vegetables. Corn and green beans are good. Brussels sprouts are yucky." "Smart girl," Mrs. Coleman laughed. "I think we'll get along just fine." Michael felt grateful for this woman's kindness, but he also felt cautious. One friendly person didn't make up for the coldness they'd received from everyone else, especially the pastor. "Are you sure we won't be intruding?" Michael asked. "Honey, this is God's house. Everyone is welcome at God's table." Mrs. Coleman's voice was firm but loving. "Besides, I cooked enough food for an army. I could use some help eating it." The fellowship hall was bustling with activity. Families filled long tables, children ran around between courses, and the sound of laughter mixed with the clinking of silverware. It should have felt joyful, but Michael noticed how conversations quieted when they walked in. Mrs. Coleman led them to a table near the kitchen. "You sit right here where I can keep an eye on you," she said. "I'll bring you some plates." As they waited, Michael observed the room. Pastor Webb sat at the head table with the church board members and their families. The Hendersons from Charlotte were there too, enjoying animated conversation about their shared connections in the community. "Look, Daddy," Marcus whispered. "The pastor is laughing with those people. He seems really nice to them." Michael watched as Pastor Webb leaned in close to listen to something William Henderson was saying. His whole face lit up with genuine interest. He asked follow-up questions, made jokes, and treated the Hendersons like honored guests. The contrast was painful and obvious. "Why doesn't he like us?" Jasmine asked in a small voice. Before Michael could answer, Mrs. Coleman returned with heaping plates of food. "Here we go. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans and cornbread fresh from the oven." "This looks delicious," Michael said, and he meant it. The food smelled like his own mother's cooking, full of love and care. "Mrs. Coleman," Marcus said politely, "how long have you been coming to this church?" "Oh, honey, I've been here for 42 years. I was about your age when my family first started attending. Pastor Webb is actually the third pastor I've served under." "Do you like him?" Jasmine asked with the directness that only children possess. Mrs. Coleman paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. She glanced toward the head table, then back at the children. "Pastor Webb is a good man," she said carefully. "He means well. Sometimes people need time to adjust to new situations." Michael understood what she wasn't saying. This wasn't the first time the church had struggled with welcoming certain families. "Mrs. Coleman," Michael said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey. Is our family the first? Are we the first black family to visit here recently?" Mrs. Coleman set down her fork. "You're not the first to visit, but you might be the first to stay for fellowship lunch in quite some time." The implications of her words settled over the table like a heavy blanket. Other families had come, but they hadn't stayed. They had gotten the message and left. "Maybe we should go," Michael said softly. "No." The firmness in Mrs. Coleman's voice surprised him. "Don't you dare let fear or ignorance drive you away from God's house. This church needs you more than you know." "But the pastor is human. Humans make mistakes. Big ones, sometimes. But that doesn't mean you give up on the church or the community." Michael looked around the fellowship hall again. Most people were still keeping their distance, but he noticed a few curious glances from some of the younger families. A little girl about Jasmine's age was staring openly, not with hostility but with the natural curiosity children have about new friends. "Besides," Mrs. Coleman continued with a mischievous smile, "if you leave now, who's going to help me finish this chocolate cake? I made 3 layers and I'm getting too old to eat it all myself." Jasmine perked up immediately. 3 layers? With chocolate frosting? And chocolate chips on top. "Daddy, we have to stay," Jasmine declared. It would be rude to leave Mrs. Coleman with all that cake. Michael couldn't help but smile. His daughter's logic was perfect. They spent the next hour eating and talking with Mrs. Coleman. She told them about the church's history, the community events they hosted, and the various programs for children. Marcus was excited to hear about the Youth Basketball League. Jasmine wanted to know about the children's choir. It felt like a normal conversation in a normal church with normal friendly people. For a moment, Michael let himself imagine what it would be like if this was how everyone here treated them. But as they were finishing their cake, voices from the head table drifted over to them. Pastor Webb was speaking a little too loudly, perhaps not realizing how sound carried in the fellowship hall. "We need to be careful about the kind of people we attract," he was saying to Harold Pritchard and the other board members. "This is a family church. We have a reputation in the community to maintain." "Exactly," Harold replied. "We can't just let anyone walk in here and expect to change our traditions. Some people need to understand that they might be more comfortable elsewhere." Michael's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The chocolate cake suddenly tasted like sawdust. His children hadn't heard. They were too busy listening to Mrs. Coleman's story about the time the church cat got stuck in the bell tower. But Michael had heard every word. Mrs. Coleman had heard it too. Her face went tight with anger and disappointment. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Michael. "I'm so sorry." Michael set down his fork and looked at his children, still innocent and hopeful, still believing that people were basically good. In a few minutes they would leave this place, and he would have to find a way to explain why some people's hearts were so small. But first, he had a decision to make. He could gather his children and leave quietly, never to return. He could protect them from further hurt and find a church where they would be welcomed with open arms. Or he could do something that might surprise everyone, including himself. Something that would either teach his children about giving up in the face of adversity, or show them what it looked like to stand firm in your faith even when others failed to live up to theirs. The choice would define not just their Sunday mornings, but the kind of man his children would see their father to be when facing the worst in human nature. That evening, Michael sat on his front porch watching his children play in the yard. Their new house in Millbrook was perfect. White picket fence, oak trees for climbing, and neighbors who waved when they drove by. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where his family could live a normal life. But after today, normal felt very far away. "Daddy," Jasmine called from the tire swing, "are we going back to that church next Sunday?" Marcus stopped throwing his football and looked over. Both children were waiting for his answer. Michael had been thinking about this question all afternoon. The easy choice would be to find another church. Millbrook had at least 6 other churches within a 15-minute drive. Some of them would probably welcome his family with open arms. "Would you like to go back?" he asked his children. "Mrs. Coleman was really nice," Jasmine said, "and she promised to save me a piece of cake next week. But the pastor didn't seem to like us very much," Marcus added quietly, "and some of the other people looked at us funny." Michael's heart ached. His children were already learning to read the signs of rejection, already developing the thick skin they would need to survive in a world that didn't always welcome them. "Come sit with me," Michael said, patting the porch steps beside him. Both children ran over and snuggled against their father. This was their favorite time of day. Just the 3 of them talking about life while the sun set behind the trees. "I want to tell you something important," Michael began. "Sometimes in life, people are going to treat you unfairly. They might not like you before they even get to know you. They might make up their minds about who you are based on what you look like or where you come from." "That's not fair," Jasmine said with the indignation that only 8-year-olds could muster. "No, sweetheart, it's not fair. But here's what I've learned. When people treat you badly, you have 2 choices. You can let their behavior change who you are inside, or you can stay true to yourself no matter what they do. Marcus frowned. But if they don't want us there, why would we go back? Michael chose his words carefully. We don't go to church for the pastor, son. We don't go for the other people. We go to worship God and to learn how to be better people ourselves. And sometimes, God puts us in places where we can help others learn and grow too. How can we help them? Jasmine asked. We're just kids. You help them by being exactly who you are, by showing them that their first impressions were wrong, by giving them a chance to do better. Michael pulled both children closer. I'm going to tell you a secret. The hardest thing in the world isn't succeeding when everyone believes in you. The hardest thing is staying strong when people doubt you, when they underestimate you, when they think you don't belong. Is that what happened to you when you were little, Daddy? Marcus asked. Michael nodded. Many times, but my mother taught me something important. She said, Michael, you can't control how other people act, but you can control how you respond. You can choose to be bitter, or you can choose to be better. The children sat quietly, processing their father's words. Finally, Jasmine spoke up. So we're going back next Sunday, if you want to. But I need you to understand something. It might not get easier right away. Some people might continue to be unfriendly. The pastor might keep ignoring us. Are you brave enough to handle that? Both children nodded solemnly. And there's one more thing, Michael continued. If we go back, we're not going to complain or feel sorry for ourselves. We're going to be the best church members we can be. We're going to help where we can, be kind to everyone, and show them what our family is really about. What if they never like us? Marcus asked. Then we'll know we tried our best, and we'll find another church. But we won't give up without giving them a real chance to know who we are. The next Sunday came faster than expected. Michael woke up early and made a special breakfast. Pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse heads, Jasmine's favorite. The children were nervous but determined. Remember, Michael said as they got dressed, we're going for the right reasons. We're going to worship, to learn, and to be good examples of what our family stands for. The drive to Grace Community Church felt different this time. Last week they had been hopeful strangers. This week they knew what they were walking into. As they pulled into the parking lot, Michael noticed the same cars as before. Harold Pritchard's black Mercedes, the Morrison family's minivan, Pastor Webb's modest sedan. Here we go, Michael said quietly. They walked through the front doors at exactly 9:25. Some people looked surprised to see them again. Others avoided eye contact entirely. But Mrs. Coleman spotted them immediately and hurried over. Well, look who came back, she said with genuine delight. I was hoping I'd see you three again. We promised we'd help you eat more cake, Jasmine said with a shy smile. That's right, honey, and I've got a fresh batch waiting for you. Pastor Webb was already at the front of the sanctuary, shuffling through his sermon notes. When he looked up and saw Michael's family taking their seats in the same back pew, his expression tightened slightly, but he quickly looked away and continued his preparation. The service began the same way as the week before. They sang Amazing Grace again. Michael's voice was strong and clear, and this time a few people turned around to listen. His children sang along more confidently, having practiced the hymns during the week. When announcement time came, Michael felt his stomach tighten. Would Pastor Webb acknowledge them this time? Good morning, Grace Community. Pastor Webb's voice boomed across the sanctuary. What a beautiful day the Lord has made. The congregation responded enthusiastically. Before we continue, I'd like to recognize our guests this morning. Michael's children sat up straighter, hopeful expressions on their faces. Pastor Webb's eyes swept the congregation. The Williams family is visiting from Raleigh. Bob and Susan, thank you for joining us this morning. The Williams family, a middle-aged white couple, stood and waved. Applause filled the sanctuary. And I believe we have some college students home for the weekend. Young people, don't be shy. 3 teenagers stood up at various points in the sanctuary. More applause. Pastor Webb continued looking around, his gaze once again passing right over Michael and his children without acknowledgement. Well then, let's give all our visitors a warm Grace Community welcome. Jasmine's face fell. Marcus clenched his fists in his lap. But Michael simply placed a gentle hand on each of their shoulders and whispered, "Remember what we talked about. We're here for the right reasons." The sermon that day was about persistence in faith. Pastor Webb spoke passionately about not giving up when things got difficult, about staying strong in the face of adversity. Sometimes, he said, his voice rising with conviction, God asks us to persevere even when we don't understand why, even when the path seems unclear, even when others doubt our commitment. Michael listened carefully, wondering if the pastor realized how his words applied to their situation. Probably not. After the service, Michael made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of heading straight to the fellowship hall or to their car, he approached Pastor Webb at the front of the church. "Pastor Webb," he said quietly, "thank you for the sermon. The message about persistence really spoke to me." Pastor Webb looked uncomfortable. "Oh, yes. Well, thank you. I was wondering," Michael continued, "if there's anything my family and I could do to help around the church. We'd like to get involved in the community here." Pastor Webb blinked in surprise. He clearly hadn't expected this. "Well, that is, we have our regular volunteers who handle most things. I understand, but surely there's something we could do. I'm handy with repairs, and my children are eager to help with anything age-appropriate." Before Pastor Webb could respond, Harold Pritchard appeared at his elbow. "Pastor, we need to discuss the budget meeting," Harold said curtly, barely glancing at Michael. "Of course," Pastor Webb replied, looking relieved for the interruption. "If you'll excuse me." He walked away with Harold, leaving Michael standing alone at the front of the church. But Michael wasn't discouraged. If anything, he was more determined than ever. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael and his children continued attending Grace Community Church, and slowly, quietly, they began to make their presence felt in ways that had nothing to do with seeking attention or approval. When Michael noticed that several light bulbs in the sanctuary had burned out, he quietly replaced them on a Tuesday evening when the church was empty. When Jasmine saw that the children's Sunday school room had broken crayons and torn coloring books, she asked her father if they could donate new supplies. The next week, fresh art supplies appeared anonymously in the classroom. When Marcus overheard Mrs. Coleman mentioning that the church van was making strange noises, Michael arranged for his mechanic to take a look at it. The repairs were paid for by an anonymous donor. Pastor Webb began to notice these improvements, but he had no idea who was responsible for them. The church board members were pleased but puzzled. "Someone's been taking very good care of our building," Harold Pritchard mentioned during one board meeting. "These repairs must have cost hundreds of dollars." "Any idea who's behind it?" asked another board member. Pastor Webb shook his head. "It's been completely anonymous. Very generous, whoever it is." Meanwhile, Michael's children were slowly making friends. Jasmine had connected with a girl named Emma during Sunday school. Marcus had impressed some of the older boys with his knowledge of basketball. Mrs. Coleman continued to be their champion, always making sure they felt welcomed and included. But the real test was still coming. 3 weeks after their first visit, Michael learned something that would challenge everything he believed about grace, forgiveness, and the power of quiet persistence. Grace Community Church was in serious financial trouble, and the decisions made in the coming weeks would reveal not only the true character of every person in that congregation, but also the real reason God had brought Michael and his children to this particular place at this particular time. Michael was washing dishes after dinner when Marcus came running into the kitchen, tears streaming down his face. His son's Sunday clothes were wrinkled, his tie crooked, and his usually bright smile was nowhere to be found. "What happened, buddy?" Michael dried his hands and knelt down to Marcus's level. "Some kids at church," they said. Marcus struggled to get the words out between sobs. "They said we don't belong there. They said their parents think we should find our own church." Michael's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Who said this to you?" "Tyler Morrison and his friends. They cornered me in the bathroom after Sunday school. Tyler said his dad told him that our family is making other families uncomfortable." Michael pulled his son into a hug, feeling the boy's shoulders shake against his chest. This was exactly what he had feared would happen. The children were paying the price for the adults' prejudices. "Did you tell anyone? The teacher? Mrs. Coleman?" Marcus shook his head. "Tyler said if I tattled it would just make things worse. He said everyone already knows we don't fit in." Jasmine appeared in the doorway, still in her yellow dress but with dirt stains on the skirt. "What's wrong with Marcus?" "Some children were unkind to your brother today," Michael said gently. "The same kids who wouldn't let me sit with them during snack time?" Jasmine asked. "Emma wanted me to sit with her, but her older sister said I should sit somewhere else." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. His children had been trying so hard to fit in, to make friends, to be part of the church community. But the rejection was spreading from the adults to the children. "Daddy," Marcus said, his voice muffled against Michael's shoulder, "are we not good enough for this church?" The question hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. These were the exact words he had hoped his children would never have to say. This was the pain he had tried to shield them from. "Listen to me, both of you," Michael said, pulling Jasmine into the hug as well. "You are good enough for any church, any school, any place in this world. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt your worth." "Then why don't they like us?" Jasmine asked. Michael took a deep breath. "How do you explain prejudice to an 8-year-old? How do you help children understand that sometimes people's hearts are too small to see past differences? Some people are afraid of what they don't understand," he said finally. "They've never had friends who look different from them, so they think different is scary. It's not about us being not good enough, it's about them not being brave enough." "But it hurts," Marcus whispered. "I know, son. It hurts me too." They sat on the kitchen floor together, the three of them wrapped in a family hug while dinner grew cold on the stove. Michael had faced rejection before, but watching his children experience it was 1,000 times worse. "Do we have to go back?" Jasmine asked. Michael was quiet for a long moment. This was the question he had been dreading. Every instinct told him to protect his children, to take them somewhere they would be welcomed and loved. But another voice in his head reminded him of the lessons he wanted to teach them about persistence, about not letting other people's actions change who you are. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. "I don't want to quit," Marcus said, surprising everyone, including himself. "Tyler Morrison is a bully, but not everyone there is mean. Mrs. Coleman is nice, and Pastor Webb's sermons are actually pretty good, even if he won't talk to us. And Emma really does want to be my friend," Jasmine added. "Her sister is the mean one, not her." Michael felt a surge of pride in his children. They were choosing courage over comfort, hope over fear. "If we keep going," he said, "things might get harder before they get better. Are you both sure you're strong enough for that?" Both children nodded. "Then we'll keep going. But I want you to promise me something. If anyone else says hurtful things to you, you come and tell me right away. We're a team, and we handle problems together." "Promise," they said in unison. The next day, Michael got a phone call that changed everything. "Mr. Jordan?" The voice on the other end was hesitant, uncertain. Michael's blood ran cold. Only one person at Grace Community Church knew his full name, Mrs. Coleman, and he had asked her to keep that information private. "This is Pastor Webb," the voice continued. "Ruth Coleman gave me your phone number. I hope you don't mind me calling." "Not at all," Michael replied carefully. "What can I do for you?" "Well, this is a bit awkward. I understand you've been helping around the church. The repairs, the supplies for the children's room, the van maintenance. Ruth tells me that was you." Michael didn't confirm or deny it. He waited. "The thing is," Pastor Webb continued, "we're facing some serious financial challenges. The roof needs major repairs, our heating system is failing, and we're behind on several bills. The board is talking about possibly closing the church." Michael felt a stab of genuine sadness. Despite everything that had happened, he had grown to love the old building. The sense of history, the potential for what the congregation could become. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said. Ruth suggested that she thought you might be willing to help us organize some fundraising events. She says you have experience with event planning. Michael almost smiled. Mrs. Coleman was clever. She was giving him a chance to help without revealing exactly who he was or what resources he had available. "I might be able to help," Michael said. "What did you have in mind? Could we meet sometime this week? Maybe Wednesday evening? We could discuss some options." "I'll be there." Wednesday evening, Michael arrived at the church to find Pastor Webb waiting in his office. The pastor looked tired, stressed, and older than his 45-year. "Thank you for coming," Pastor Webb said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I'll be honest with you, Michael. I don't know much about you, but Ruth speaks very highly of your character. And frankly, we're running out of options." Michael nodded. "What's the situation?" Pastor Webb pulled out a folder filled with bills and estimates. "The roof repairs alone will cost $15,000. The heating system needs another $8,000. We're 3 months behind on our insurance, and the mortgage payment is due next week. How much time do you have? If we can't raise at least $10,000 in the next month, we'll have to close our doors." Michael looked around the office, taking in the pictures of church events, the shelves full of theology books, the certificates and awards hanging on the walls. This was Pastor Webb's life work, his calling. "What about the congregation? How much can they contribute?" Pastor Webb sighed. "We've asked. Most families are already giving what they can. Harold Pritchard has been our biggest supporter, but even he can't cover everything. What if we organized some community events? Brought in people from outside the congregation?" "What kind of events?" Michael's mind was already working. He had organized charity events before, had connections throughout North Carolina, knew how to bring people together for a good cause. "A carnival," he said, "with games, food, entertainment, something that would appeal to families throughout Millbrook. We could charge admission, sell food, have raffles and auctions." Pastor Webb leaned forward. "That sounds ambitious. Do you really think we could pull off something like that?" "With the right planning and volunteers, absolutely, but it would require the whole congregation to work together. Everyone would need to put aside their differences and focus on saving the church." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The church that had struggled to welcome Michael's family would now need to work with them to survive. "I'll propose it to the board," Pastor Webb said. "When could we start planning?" "Immediately. We'd need at least 3 weeks to organize everything properly." As Michael drove home that night, he thought about the conversation. This was his chance to help the church that had rejected his family. It was also his chance to show them what he was really capable of, what kind of person they had been judging so harshly. But more importantly, it was his chance to teach his children something vital about grace. That sometimes you help people not because they deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do. The test of character he had been expecting was finally here. And it wasn't just a test for Pastor Webb or the congregation. It was a test for Michael and his children too. Would they choose to save the church that had failed to welcome them? Would they prove that love could triumph over prejudice, that grace could overcome rejection? The answer would determine not just the future of Grace Community Church, but the kind of people the Jordan family would choose to be when faced with the opportunity to repay coldness with kindness. And unknown to everyone except Mrs. Coleman, the man they had dismissed as unimportant was about to show them what true leadership looked like. The Grace Community Church Carnival was supposed to be a small event in the church parking lot, with a few homemade games and some hot dogs. That was what the church board had approved when Pastor Webb presented Michael's idea. What actually happened on the first Saturday of October was something nobody had expected. Michael arrived at the church at 6 in the morning to help set up. He expected to find maybe a handful of volunteers arranging card tables and hanging streamers. Instead, he found the parking lot transformed into something magical. Professional quality game booths lined the perimeter. A small Ferris wheel gleamed in the morning sun. Food trucks were parked along the street, offering everything from funnel cakes to barbecue. The stage had been set up for live music, and workers were putting the finishing touches on a small petting zoo in the church's side yard. Pastor Webb stood in the middle of it all, looking completely bewildered. "Michael," he called out when he spotted him. "What? How did all this happen?" "Community partnerships," Michael replied simply. "I made some phone calls, reached out to local businesses. Everyone wanted to help once they heard about the church's situation." What Michael didn't mention was that he had spent the last 2 weeks using connections he had built over years of charity work. He had called in favors, made arrangements, and yes, he had quietly paid for several of the more expensive attractions himself. But he wasn't about to tell Pastor Webb that. "This must have cost a fortune," Pastor Webb said, still staring at the Ferris wheel. "Sometimes people are more generous than you expect," Michael said. "Especially when it's for a good cause." Mrs. Coleman appeared beside them, carrying a clipboard and wearing a huge smile. "Morning, gentlemen," she said cheerfully. "Michael, the face painting booth is ready, and the children's choir is warming up for their noon performance. Pastor Webb, the local news station, wants to interview you in about an hour." "The news station?" Pastor Webb looked panicked. "Good publicity for the church," Michael explained. "This kind of community event shows people what Grace Community is all about." As the morning progressed, families began arriving from all over Millbrook and the surrounding towns. Word had spread quickly about the carnival, and people were curious to see what the little church had put together. Michael worked alongside the other volunteers, helping wherever he was needed. He served food, ran games, and made sure everything operated smoothly. What impressed people most wasn't his efficiency or organization skills, but the way he treated everyone he met. When Mrs. Patterson's grandbaby started crying during the face painting, Michael stepped in to help calm the child with gentle words and funny faces. When elderly Miss Henderson needed help walking to the food trucks, Michael offered his arm and walked slowly, patiently listening to stories about the old days in Millbrook. Pastor Webb watched from a distance, amazed by what he was seeing. This was the same man he had ignored for weeks, the same family he had failed to welcome properly. But Michael showed no bitterness, no resentment. He just worked quietly and effectively, making sure everyone had a good time. "He's something special, isn't he?" Mrs. Coleman appeared beside Pastor Webb. "I'm beginning to see that," Pastor Webb admitted. "Ruth, I owe that man an apology. A big one." "Yes, you do. But maybe wait until after today. He's got his hands full right now." Around noon, disaster struck. 7-year-old Katie Williams, visiting with her family from the next town over, was running between the game booths when she tripped and fell hard on the asphalt. Her knee was badly scraped and bleeding, and she was crying hysterically. Her parents rushed over, but they seemed to panic when they saw the blood. Other people gathered around, offering suggestions but not really knowing what to do. Michael appeared through the crowd like he had been expecting this exact situation. "Hey there, Katie," he said, kneeling down beside the frightened little girl. His voice was calm and soothing. "That looks like it hurts pretty bad." Katie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I bet you're really brave, though. I can tell just by looking at you. Can you show me how brave you are?" While he talked, Michael was already taking action. He had somehow produced a first aid kit and was gently cleaning the wound with the skill of someone who had dealt with injuries many times before. "My knee really hurts," Katie whimpered. "I know it does, sweetheart, but you know what? This is going to heal up just fine. In a week, you'll have a cool story to tell all your friends about the time you got hurt at a carnival and met some really nice people who helped you feel better." Michael worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning the cut, applying antiseptic, and bandaging the knee. His hands were steady and sure, and his calm confidence seemed to transfer to Katie. "There you go," he said when he finished. "Good as new." "Well, almost as good as new." Katie had stopped crying. She looked down at her bandaged knee with something approaching pride. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're very welcome. Now I think someone owes you an extra trip to the prize booth for being so brave. What do you think?" Katie's face lit up with excitement. Her parents, who had been watching in amazement, stepped forward to thank Michael. "Are you a doctor?" Katie's father asked. "No," Michael replied with a smile. "I've just had some experience with bumps and bruises." Pastor Webb had watched the entire incident from nearby. He had seen Michael's natural leadership, his calm under pressure, and his gentle way with the frightened child. This wasn't just kindness. This was someone who knew how to take charge when others were lost. The rest of the day passed smoothly. The carnival was a bigger success than anyone had dreamed possible. Families laughed and played games, children squealed with delight on the rides, and the smell of popcorn and cotton candy filled the air. By evening, when the last game booth was packed away and the final food truck had driven off, the volunteers gathered in the church fellowship hall to count the money. The total was staggering: $12,437. Harold Pritchard announced, his voice filled with disbelief. "In one day, we raised more money today than we usually raise in 6 months." The room erupted in cheers and applause. People hugged each other, laughed, and talked excitedly about what this meant for the church's future. Pastor Webb stood at the front of the room, looking around at the faces of his congregation. They were tired, but happy, proud of what they had accomplished together. "This was a miracle," he said. "But it wasn't the kind of miracle where money just appeared out of nowhere. It was the kind of miracle that happens when people work together, when they put aside their differences and focus on something bigger than themselves." His eyes found Michael, who was sitting quietly in the back with his children. "Some of you worked harder than others today. Some of you went above and beyond what anyone could have expected. And some of you," Pastor Webb paused, his voice becoming emotional, "some of you gave this church a gift that we didn't deserve." The room fell silent. Everyone knew he was talking about Michael, though most of them still didn't fully understand what had really happened. "Michael," Pastor Webb said, "would you come up here, please?" Michael hesitated. He didn't want attention or praise. He had helped because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted recognition. But Jasmine tugged on his sleeve. "Go on, Daddy. He wants to thank you." Michael walked to the front of the room, feeling all eyes on him. Pastor Webb extended his hand. Not the brief, cold handshake from that first Sunday, but a warm, firm grip between two men who finally saw each other clearly. "I owe you an apology," Pastor Webb said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I owe your whole family an apology. When you first came to our church, I failed to welcome you the way Christ would have welcomed you. I let my own prejudices and fears blind me to who you really are. Michael started to speak, but Pastor Webb held up his hand. Let me finish. Today, you showed us what true Christian service looks like. You organized this entire event, brought our community together, and asked for nothing in return. You did this for a church that had failed to embrace you and your children. Pastor Webb's voice cracked slightly. That's not just kindness, that's grace. That's the kind of love Jesus talked about, loving your enemies, doing good to those who hurt you. The room was completely silent now. Some people looked ashamed. Others seemed to be seeing Michael clearly for the first time. I hope, Pastor Webb continued, that you can forgive this church for our failures. And I hope you'll give us another chance to show you the welcome we should have offered from the very beginning. Michael looked around the room at all the faces staring back at him. Some were friendly, some curious, some still uncertain. But for the first time since they had started attending Grace Community Church, no one was looking away. Pastor Webb, Michael said quietly, there's nothing to forgive. We all fall short sometimes. What matters is what we do next. As Michael walked back to his seat, he felt something shift in the room. Not everything was fixed. Change would take time. But something important had begun. Unfortunately, not everyone in the congregation was ready for that change. And the real test of Grace Community Church's character was still to come. The Monday morning after the carnival, Harold Pritchard was not in a good mood. He sat in his office at Pritchard Industries, staring out the window at downtown Millbrook. His secretary had already brought him 3 cups of coffee and a stack of phone messages, but Harold wasn't interested in business today. He was thinking about what had happened at Grace Community Church. The carnival had been a success, too much of a success, in Harold's opinion. And it was all because of that Michael fellow and his children. Harold prided himself on knowing everyone important in Millbrook. He knew their families, their businesses, their connections. But this Michael was a mystery. Nobody seemed to know where he had come from or what he did for work. Yet somehow he had organized an event that brought professional vendors, media attention, and thousands of dollars to the church. That kind of influence didn't come from nowhere, and Harold Pritchard didn't like mysteries, especially when they threatened his position as the most important person at Grace Community Church. His phone rang. Mr. Pritchard, this is Janet Morrison. From the church? We need to talk. Janet Morrison was the mother of Tyler, the boy who had been cruel to Marcus. She was also the leader of several church committees and one of Harold's strongest supporters. What's on your mind, Janet? It's about yesterday, about this Michael person and all the attention he's getting. Some of us are concerned. Concerned about what? About the direction the church is heading, about outside influences taking over our traditions. My husband thinks we need to do something before things get out of hand. Harold leaned back in his chair. This was exactly what he had been hoping to hear. Why don't you come by my office this afternoon? Bring anyone else who shares your concerns. Let's discuss this properly. By 4 o'clock, Harold's conference room was filled with a dozen church members. The Morrison family, the Hendersons, several board members, and other longtime supporters of Grace Community Church. Let me be clear about why we're here, Harold began. Yesterday's carnival was successful, yes, but at what cost? We've allowed an outsider to take control of our church's image and direction. But Harold, said Margaret Henderson hesitantly, the carnival saved the church. We raised enough money to fix the roof and pay our bills. That's exactly the problem, Janet Morrison interrupted. Now everyone thinks this Michael person is some kind of hero. Pastor Webb practically worshipped him yesterday. But what do we really know about him? Harold nodded approvingly. Janet's right. This man appears out of nowhere, starts making changes, brings in outside vendors and media attention. He's turning our quiet family church into some kind of public spectacle. And his children, added Bob Morrison, Janet's husband. They're affecting the dynamics in Sunday school. Some of our kids are asking uncomfortable questions about why we weren't friendlier to them before. Children shouldn't be exposed to that kind of division, Janet said firmly. It's not healthy for them to see conflict where there should be harmony. Harold stood up and walked to the window. Here's what I think is happening. This Michael fellow has some kind of agenda. Maybe he's trying to take over the church leadership. Maybe he wants to change our worship style or our community connection. Either way, he's disrupting the stability we've worked years to build. What do you suggest we do? Asked one of the board members. We remind Pastor Webb where his loyalties should lie. We make it clear that while we appreciate the carnival's success, we can't allow one event to overshadow years of faithful service from our core congregation. Margaret Henderson looked uncomfortable. Harold, I understand your concerns, but the man seems genuinely nice, and his children are lovely. I'm sure they are, Harold replied smoothly. But this isn't about whether they're nice people. It's about preserving the character and traditions of our church. Some people just fit better in certain communities. The coded language wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Harold was careful never to say anything directly racist, but his meaning was clear. What exactly are you proposing? Bob Morrison asked. We talked to Pastor Webb. We remind him that his primary responsibility is to the families who have supported this church for generations. We make it clear that while everyone is welcome to attend services, leadership and influence should remain with those who truly understand our community values. Janet Morrison nodded enthusiastically. And if Pastor Webb won't listen, then we remind him that this church depends on the financial support of its committed members. Michael may have organized one successful fundraiser, but we're the ones who pay the bills every month. Harold's threat was subtle but unmistakable. If Pastor Webb didn't limit Michael's influence, Harold and his supporters would withdraw their financial backing. The meeting continued for another hour, with the group developing their strategy. They would approach Pastor Webb as a unified group. They would frame their concerns in terms of church stability and community values. They would make it clear that continuing to give Michael special attention would have serious consequences. As the group prepared to leave, Harold felt satisfied. He had handled this kind of situation before. Sometimes outsiders needed to be reminded that while they might be welcome to attend church, they weren't welcome to change it. The next Sunday, the atmosphere at Grace Community Church felt different. During the service, Michael noticed whispered conversations and meaningful glances between certain congregation members. Pastor Webb seemed nervous and distracted during his sermon. After the service, instead of the warm fellowship they had experienced the week before, Michael and his children found themselves once again isolated. People who had thanked them enthusiastically for the carnival now offered only polite nods and brief smiles. "Daddy," Jasmine whispered as they walked to their car. "Why is everyone acting weird again?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes people need time to process change." But Michael had a sinking feeling that something more serious was happening. His suspicions were confirmed on Tuesday evening when Pastor Webb called. "Michael, could you come to the church tonight? There's something we need to discuss." When Michael arrived, he found Pastor Webb waiting in his office. The pastor looked tired and troubled. "Sit down, Michael. This is difficult." Michael waited. "I've had several conversations over the past few days with board members, with long-time church families. They have some concerns about the direction things are heading." "What kind of concerns?" Pastor Webb struggled with his words. "They feel that perhaps the carnival gave you too much visibility, too much influence. They're worried that newer members might start expecting the same level of involvement in church decisions." Michael felt a familiar coldness settling in his chest. "I see. Don't get me wrong, Pastor Webb continued quickly. Everyone appreciates what you did. The carnival was wonderful, but some people feel that maintaining church traditions and stability requires careful leadership transition. What are you asking me to do? Pastor Webb couldn't meet his eyes. Maybe step back a little. Continue attending, of course, but perhaps let the established committees handle future events and decisions. Michael sat quietly for a long moment. He thought about his children, who had been so proud of their father's work at the carnival. He thought about Mrs. Coleman, who had believed in their family when no one else would. He thought about the lessons he was trying to teach Marcus and Jasmine about persistence and dignity. Pastor Webb, he said finally, are you asking me to become invisible again? The question hung in the air between them. Pastor Webb knew exactly what Michael meant. After weeks of being ignored, overlooked and dismissed, Michael had finally been seen and acknowledged. Now they wanted him to disappear back into the shadows. It's not about you personally, Pastor Webb said weakly. It's about maintaining harmony in the congregation. Whose harmony? Michael asked. The people who welcomed us, or the people who never wanted us here in the first place? Pastor Webb didn't answer, but his silence said everything. Michael stood up to leave. As he reached the door, he turned back. Pastor Webb, I have a question for you. When you preach about loving your neighbor, do you mean it, or are those just words you say because they're expected? Pastor Webb looked stricken. Of course I mean it. Then I hope you'll think carefully about what you're really being asked to choose between. Because it's not about church harmony. It's about whether you believe some people's comfort is more important than other people's dignity. Michael left Pastor Webb sitting alone in his office, facing the hardest decision of his ministry. The battle for the soul of Grace Community Church was about to begin, and Michael was about to receive news that would test his own faith in ways he had never imagined. Michael's phone rang at 11:30 on Thursday night. He was reading in his study, enjoying the quiet house after putting his children to bed. The caller ID showed a Chicago number he recognized immediately. Hello, Mom. Michael, honey. His mother's voice was weak, breathless. I'm at the hospital. Michael's book fell to the floor. What happened? Are you okay? I had some chest pains earlier. The doctors say. They say it was a heart attack. A small one, but still. Michael was already reaching for his car keys. I'm coming. Which hospital? Northwestern Memorial. But honey, you don't need. Mom, I'll be there as soon as I can. Just rest. Don't worry about anything else. After hanging up, Michael sat in his chair for a moment, his hands shaking slightly. His mother was 73 years old and had been the strongest person in his life. The thought of losing her was unbearable. He called Mrs. Coleman, knowing she would understand. Ruth, I'm sorry to call so late. It's my mother. She's had a heart attack in Chicago. I need to leave immediately. Oh my goodness. Of course, honey. What can I do? Could you keep an eye on Marcus and Jasmine? The Hendersons next door have agreed to watch them, but I'd feel better knowing you're checking on them too. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll make sure those babies are taken care of. You just focus on your mama. As Michael packed a quick bag, his mind raced. The drive to Chicago would take 6 hours. He could be there by morning, but leaving now meant he would miss Sunday's service at Grace Community Church, the first Sunday after his confrontation with Pastor Webb. Maybe that was for the best. Let the congregation see what it was like without him there. Let Pastor Webb face Harold Pritchard's pressure without having to worry about Michael's presence complicating things. Before leaving, Michael stopped by Mrs. Coleman's house. She was waiting on her front porch in her robe and slippers. How is she? She asked immediately. Stable, they think. But I need to be there. Mrs. Coleman studied his face in the porch light. Michael, there's something I need to tell you before you go, about what's been happening at church. Ruth, whatever it is, can wait. I need to get to Chicago. No, it can't wait. Harold Pritchard has been organizing people against you. He's been telling them you're trying to take over the church, change our traditions. He's putting pressure on Pastor Webb to limit your involvement. Michael wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. There's more, Mrs. Coleman continued. Some people are asking questions about who you really are. Harold hired someone to look into your background. This got Michael's attention. What kind of questions? Where you work, how you afforded to help with the carnival, why you moved to Millbrook. Harold thinks you're hiding something. Michael realized his secret might not stay secret much longer. Maybe it was time to tell Mrs. Coleman the truth. Ruth, can you keep a confidence? You know I can. My full name is Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Mrs. Coleman stared at him for a long moment, then sank into her porch chair. The Michael Jordan? The basketball player? Yes, ma'am. Oh, my stars. She fanned herself with her hand. All this time you've been, and we've been treating you like... Oh, that poor Pastor Webb doesn't even know. I wanted it that way. I moved here, hoping my children could have a normal childhood, away from all the attention that comes with my name. I wanted to see if people would accept us for who we are, not who I'm famous for being. Mrs. Coleman's eyes filled with tears. And we failed that test, didn't we? We showed you exactly who we really are when we thought you couldn't do anything for us. Some people failed. You didn't. You welcomed us from the first day. What are you going to do when Harold finds out? Because he will find out. Michael thought about this as he loaded his suitcase into the car. I don't know. Right now I just need to focus on my mother. The drive to Chicago gave Michael 6 hours to think about his mother, who had raised him to judge people by their character, not their circumstances, about his children who were learning hard lessons about human nature, about Pastor Webb, who was facing the biggest test of his ministry, about Mrs. Coleman, who had shown him what true Christian love looked like, and about Harold Pritchard, who was about to discover that the man he had been trying to push out of Grace Community Church was one of the most famous people in the world. Michael arrived at Northwestern Memorial Hospital as the sun was rising over Lake Michigan. His mother looked small and frail in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and IV lines. But her eyes lit up when she saw him. "There's my boy," she said softly. "How are you feeling, Mum?" "Like I got hit by a truck. But the doctors say I'm going to be fine. The heart is strong, just needs a little tune-up." Michael pulled a chair close to her bed. "I was so scared when you called." "I know, honey. But you didn't have to drive all night. I would have been fine until morning." "No, you wouldn't have, and I wouldn't have been fine either." They talked quietly for the next hour about her condition, her treatment plan, and her recovery. The doctors were optimistic, but she would need several weeks of rest and rehabilitation. "Mum, I want you to come stay with us in North Carolina while you recover. I don't want to be a burden." "You could never be a burden. Besides, Marcus and Jasmine would love to have their grandmother close by for a while. How are my grandbabies? And how are things at that new church you've been attending?" Michael hesitated. "How do you tell your mother that the church family you hope to join has been rejecting you based on the color of your skin?" It's been complicated. His mother had always been able to read him like a book. What kind of complicated? So Michael told her everything. About Pastor Webb's coldness, about the children's hurt feelings, about the carnival's success and Harold Pritchard's backlash, about the test of character that his family had been living through for the past 2 months. His mother listened without interrupting, her expression growing sadder with each detail. "Michael Jeffrey Jordan," she said when he finished, "you know what you have to do." "What's that?" "You have to show them what grace looks like. Real grace. The kind that gives people what they need, not what they deserve." "Mum, they don't want us there. They've made that clear." "That's exactly why you need to stay. Not for them, for your children. You think I didn't face the same kind of treatment when you were growing up? You think there weren't people who tried to make me feel small, who questioned whether I belonged in certain places? Michael remembered some of those times, though his mother had tried to shield him from the worst of it. The difference, she continued, is that I didn't have your resources, your platform, your influence. You have the power to change hearts and minds in ways I never could. But only if you're willing to stay in the fight long enough to matter. What if they never change? Then you'll know you tried, and your children will know their father doesn't run from difficulty. They'll know he stands up for what's right, even when it's hard. A nurse came in to check on his mother, ending their conversation temporarily. But as Michael sat in the hospital room, watching his mother rest, he thought about her words. She was right, of course. She usually was. Meanwhile, back in Millbrook, Harold Pritchard was sitting in his office reading a report that would change everything. His private investigator had done thorough work. Tax records, property deeds, business registrations. Everything was there in black and white. Michael Jordan. The Michael Jordan. Net worth estimated at over $1 billion. Owner of the Charlotte Hornets. Global icon. One of the most recognizable people on the planet. And Harold Pritchard had been trying to push him out of a small-town church. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. Harold realized that in a matter of days, this information would leak out. The media would descend on Millbrook. Everyone would know that Grace Community Church had failed to welcome the most famous basketball player in history. The embarrassment would be devastating. But more importantly for Harold, the financial opportunity was enormous. If he played this right, Michael Jordan's presence could bring national attention, donations and prestige to Grace Community Church. Harold could position himself as the man who discovered and welcomed the superstar. The church could become a tourist destination. All he had to do was completely reverse everything he had been saying for the past week. Harold picked up his phone and started making calls. It was time for Grace Community Church to give Michael Jordan the welcome he deserved. Whether Michael wanted it or not, Harold Pritchard could barely contain his excitement as he called an emergency board meeting for Friday evening. His hands shook slightly as he dialed each number, already imagining the headlines: Michael Jordan finds spiritual home at Grace Community Church, and small-town church welcomes basketball legend. By 7 o'clock, the church conference room was packed. Pastor Webb sat at the head of the table, looking confused and tired. The same board members who had pressured him just days ago to limit Michael's involvement were now gathered with eager faces. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Harold began, barely able to suppress his grin. "I have some extraordinary news to share." He opened a manila folder and pulled out several printed pages. "Gentlemen, ladies, we have been blessed beyond our wildest imagination. Our visitor, Michael, the man who organized our successful carnival." Harold paused dramatically. "His full name is Michael Jeffrey Jordan." The room fell silent. Several people looked confused. "The Michael Jordan," Harold continued, "six-time NBA champion. Considered by many to be the greatest basketball player who ever lived. Current owner of the Charlotte Hornets. Net worth over $1 billion. Margaret Henderson gasped. "You're joking." "I'm completely serious. Look for yourselves." Harold passed around photographs printed from internet searches. Michael in his Chicago Bulls uniform. Michael receiving awards. Michael at charity events. Pastor Webb stared at the photos in disbelief. This whole time, Harold repeated, "we have had basketball royalty sitting in our back pews. And we almost missed the greatest opportunity in our church's history." "How did you find this out?" asked Bob Morrison. Harold waved dismissively. "That's not important. What matters is what we do next." Janet Morrison raised her hand tentatively. "Harold, didn't we just spend all week talking about how this Michael person was disrupting our church traditions? Harold's smile never wavered. Janet, that was before we understood who we were dealing with. This changes everything. Do you realize what kind of attention this could bring to our church? What kind of opportunities? What kind of opportunities? Pastor Webb asked cautiously. Harold pulled out a notepad covered with his handwriting. I've been making some calls, doing research. Churches that have celebrity members receive massive donations. Media coverage, tourism. People travel from all over the country just to attend the same church as famous people. But Harold, Margaret Henderson interrupted. We haven't exactly been welcoming to him. In fact, we've been quite the opposite, which is why we need to act quickly, Harold replied. We need to make this right before he decides to leave permanently. Pastor Webb looked uncomfortable. He's in Chicago right now. His mother is in the hospital. Perfect timing, Harold said. When he returns, we'll be ready with the welcome he deserves. I'm thinking a special service in his honor. Maybe name him an honorary deacon. We could invite local media to cover the story. Wait, said Bob Morrison. Last week you were telling us he was a threat to our church's stability. Now you want to make him an honorary deacon? Harold's expression hardened slightly. Bob, sometimes circumstances require us to adjust our perspective. The important thing is what's best for Grace Community Church. Pastor Webb was studying one of the photos, Michael in his Bulls uniform, holding a championship trophy. I can't believe this. All those Sundays when I barely acknowledged him. Don't worry about the past, Harold said quickly. Let's focus on the future. Think about what this means for our building fund, our programs, our community outreach. Harold, Pastor Webb said slowly, are you suggesting we honor Michael because of who he is, or because of what he can do for us? The question hung in the air. Harold's smile faltered for just a moment before returning. I'm suggesting we give him the recognition he's always deserved. It's just fortunate that his recognition happens to benefit the church as well. Mrs. Coleman, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. Have any of you thought about how Michael might feel about this sudden change of heart? Harold looked annoyed by the interruption. Ruth, I'm sure he'll be thrilled to finally receive proper appreciation from his church family. Will he? Because the man who sat in our pews for months wasn't looking for special treatment. He was looking for acceptance. And when we couldn't give him that, he still helped save our church. Exactly, Harold exclaimed, missing her point entirely, which proves what an exceptional person he is. All the more reason to honor him appropriately. Pastor Webb was still staring at the photos. Ruth's right. We're talking about celebrating a man we rejected, about honoring someone we couldn't even be bothered to acknowledge. Pastor, Harold said firmly, I understand you might have some guilt about past oversights, but dwelling on that won't help anyone. We need to think strategically about Grace Community's future. Strategically, Pastor Webb repeated quietly. Yes, this is an opportunity that might never come again. Do you know what kind of donations we could receive if people knew Michael Jordan was a member here? We could expand our facilities, increase our programs, really make a difference in the community. Margaret Henderson looked troubled. But what if he doesn't want all this attention? What if he was attending here precisely because he wanted to avoid publicity? Harold waved dismissively. Margaret, famous people always want recognition. They might say they want privacy, but deep down, they expect special treatment. Mrs. Coleman stood up abruptly. Harold Pritchard, you don't know what you're talking about. That man wanted exactly what every person who walks through our doors wants, to be welcomed as a child of God. Nothing more, nothing less. Ruth, please sit down. You're being emotional about this. I'm being honest about this. You want to use Michael's fame to make this church rich and famous. But you couldn't see his worth when you thought he was nobody special. Harold's patience was wearing thin. Ruth, I think you're forgetting that some of us have been faithful members of this church for decades. Some of us have supported this congregation financially when others could not. Some of us have earned the right to have opinions about the church's direction. The threat was subtle, but clear. Mrs. Coleman had been attending Grace Community for over 40 years, but she had never been a major financial contributor. Pastor Webb finally looked up from the photos. So what exactly are you proposing, Harold? A celebration service this Sunday. We welcome Michael back from Chicago with the fanfare he deserves. We present him with some kind of honor, maybe a plaque or a special certificate. We invite the local newspaper, maybe a TV station. We show the community that Grace Community Church knows how to appreciate extraordinary people. And if he doesn't want a public celebration, then we convince him otherwise. We explain how much this would mean to the church, to the community. Surely he'll understand the importance of using his platform for good. Pastor Webb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion. I need time to think about this. Time is something we don't have, Harold pressed. Every day we wait is another day he might decide to find a different church, one that will appreciate him properly. As the meeting broke up, most board members seemed excited about Harold's plan. They talked eagerly about the possibilities, the opportunities, the potential for growth and recognition. But Pastor Webb walked slowly to his office, carrying the photos of Michael Jordan. He sat behind his desk and spread them out, studying the face of the man he had ignored for months. In every photo, Michael was smiling. But Pastor Webb realized that in all the weeks Michael had attended Grace Community Church, he had rarely seen that same genuine smile. Meanwhile, Mrs. Coleman drove home with a heavy heart. She knew Harold's plan would devastate Michael when he returned from Chicago. The man who had quietly served their church while being rejected would now be celebrated for all the wrong reasons. She also knew she was the only person who could warn him about what was coming. But first, she needed to decide whether protecting Michael's feelings was more important than potentially saving Grace Community Church from making the biggest mistake in its history. The choice would affect not just Michael and his children, but every person who had ever felt unwelcome, overlooked, or judged in that sanctuary. Because if the church could reject Michael Jordan when they thought he was nobody, and then celebrate him when they learned he was famous, what did that say about their understanding of Christian love? And what would it teach the children who had been watching this entire drama unfold? Michael arrived back in Millbrook on Saturday evening, exhausted from 5 days at his mother's bedside. The good news was that she was recovering well and would be able to travel to North Carolina in 2 weeks. The difficult news was everything Mrs. Coleman had told him over the phone. His secret was out. Harold Pritchard knew exactly who he was, and the church was planning some kind of celebration for Sunday morning. "Daddy!" Jasmine ran to him as he walked through the front door. "How's Grandma? Is she coming to visit soon?" "Grandma is doing much better, sweetheart. The doctors say she'll be fine, and yes, she'll come stay with us while she gets completely well." Marcus appeared from the kitchen, where he had been doing homework at the table. "Did you tell her about our church? About how some people were mean, but Mrs. Coleman is really nice?" Michael hugged both his children tightly. "I told her everything, and she gave me some very good advice about what we should do next." "What kind of advice?" Jasmine asked. "She reminded me that sometimes people need more than one chance to do the right thing, and that the most important lessons come from how we handle difficult situations." The phone rang before Michael could explain further. Mrs. Coleman's voice was filled with worry. "Michael, honey, are you home safe?" "Just walked in the door." "Ruth, tell me exactly what's been happening." "It's worse than I thought. Harold has the whole board excited about this celebration tomorrow. He's invited the newspaper, and I think he called a TV station too. Pastor Webb looks like he hasn't slept in days." Michael closed his eyes. This was exactly what he had feared would happen if his identity became known. "They don't want to honor me, Ruth. They want to use me. I know that, and you know that. But most of the congregation thinks this is their chance to make things right. They honestly believe they're doing something good." "What about Pastor Webb? What does he think?" Mrs. Coleman sighed. "Pastor Webb knows this is wrong, but he's scared. Harold's been reminding everyone about who pays the bills around here. The man's caught between his conscience and his job." Michael looked at his children, who were listening to his side of the conversation with growing concern. "Ruth, what would happen if I just didn't show up tomorrow?" "Harold would probably claim you're being ungrateful. He'd tell everyone that Grace Community tried to honor you, but you rejected their efforts. He'd make himself look like the victim. And if I do show up, then you'll have to decide whether to let them celebrate you for being famous, or tell them what you really think about how they've treated your family." After hanging up, Michael sat his children down in the living room for a serious conversation. "Kids, there's something I need to tell you about tomorrow's church service. Are we not going?" Marcus asked hopefully. "Because Tyler Morrison's been telling everyone that we think we're better than them now." "Tyler's been mean to you again?" "He said his dad told him that our family is just pretending to be normal church people, but we're really rich and famous and looking down on everyone." Michael felt his heart breaking all over again. Even when his identity was revealed, it was being used to hurt his children. "Jasmine, Marcus, listen to me carefully. Tomorrow at church, some people are going to treat us very differently than they have before. They're going to be extra nice, extra friendly, extra welcoming." "That sounds good," Jasmine said hopefully. "It would be good if it were real, but they're only being nice because they found out something about Daddy that makes them think we're important." "What did they find out?" Marcus asked. Michael had been dreading this moment, but he knew his children deserved the truth. "They found out that before you were born, I played basketball professionally. I was pretty good at it, and some people know who I am because of that." Both children stared at him. Marcus spoke first. "You played professional basketball? Like on TV?" "Yes, son. For many years. But that was my job, not who I am as a person. And it's definitely not why we started going to Grace Community Church." "Why didn't you tell us?" Jasmine asked. "Because I wanted you to have normal childhoods, away from all the attention that comes with having a famous parent. And I wanted people to get to know our family for who we really are, not because of something I did for work." Marcus was processing this information carefully. "So the people at church have been mean to us even though you're famous?" "Yes, and now that they know I'm famous, they want to be nice to us. But do you see the problem with that?" Both children nodded slowly. "They should have been nice to us all along," Jasmine said. "Because we're people, not because you're famous." "Exactly right, sweetheart. So what do we do tomorrow?" Marcus asked. Michael thought about his mother's words, about grace and dignity, about teaching his children the right lessons. "We go to church, we listen to what people have to say, and then we make a decision about whether Grace Community Church is really the right place for our family." "What if they apologize?" Jasmine asked. "What if they say they're sorry for being mean? Then we'll have to decide if they mean it, or if they're just sorry because they found out Daddy used to be famous." Sunday morning arrived with a flurry of activity at Grace Community Church. Harold Pritchard was there early, directing the placement of flowers and a new banner that read, "Welcome Home, Michael." Pastor Webb stood at the front of the sanctuary watching the preparations with a sick feeling in his stomach. Mrs. Coleman arrived to find the fellowship hall decorated with balloons and streamers. A cake sat on the main table with "Congratulations, Michael Jordan" written in blue and gold frosting. "This is a circus," she muttered to herself. By 9:15, the sanctuary was more crowded than it had ever been. Word had spread throughout Millbrook about Michael Jordan's membership at Grace Community Church. People who hadn't attended services in years filled the pews. A reporter from the local newspaper sat in the front row, and a cameraman from the regional TV station set up equipment in the back. At 9:25, Michael walked through the front doors with his children. The moment they appeared, the entire congregation turned to look. People who had ignored them for months now smiled broadly and waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Jordan." Harold Pritchard hurried down the center aisle with his arms outstretched. "Welcome back. We've missed you so much." Michael shook Harold's hand politely, but didn't return his enthusiasm. "Hello, Mr. Pritchard. Please call me Harold. We're family here at Grace Community. I've saved special seats for you and your beautiful children right here in the front row." Michael looked at the front pew, which had been roped off with a red velvet cord. A small sign read, "Reserved for the Jordan family. Thank you, but we usually sit in the back." "Nonsense. Not today. Today is your day." Pastor Webb appeared beside them, looking pale and nervous. "Michael, welcome back. How is your mother?" "She's recovering well, thank you for asking." "I'm so glad to hear that. Listen, we have a small presentation planned for today, to show our appreciation for everything you've done for the church." Michael looked around at all the decorations, the cameras, the excited faces staring at him. "Pastor Webb, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Of course, of course." "Harold, could you escort the children to their seats?" Michael and Pastor Webb stepped into a small side room off the sanctuary. Through the open door they could hear the congregation buzzing with excitement. "Pastor," Michael said quietly, "what is this really about?" Pastor Webb couldn't meet his eyes. "We wanted to make up for any oversights in our previous welcomes. To show you how much we value you as a member of our church family." "Do you value me as a member?" "Of course we do." "Since when?" The question hung between them like a physical presence. Pastor Webb finally looked up, and Michael could see the shame and guilt written across his face. "Michael, I know how this looks. I know we should have welcomed you properly from the beginning. But this celebration, it's our way of making things right. By celebrating my fame instead of accepting my humanity." Pastor Webb flinched as if he'd been slapped. We're not. "Pastor Webb, I've been coming to this church for months. My children have sat in your pews, sung your hymns, listened to your sermons about loving your neighbor. We've been rejected, ignored, and made to feel unwelcome. And now, because you know I used to play basketball, suddenly we're family." "Michael, please understand." "I understand perfectly. This isn't about making things right. This is about Harold Pritchard seeing an opportunity to use my name for publicity and donations." Pastor Webb's shoulders sagged. "You're right. And I hate that you're right. I hate that I let this happen." Michael studied the pastor's face and saw genuine remorse there, mixed with fear and confusion. "Pastor Webb, let me ask you something. If I walk out there right now and tell your congregation exactly what I think about this celebration, what will you do?" I don't know. Will you stand with me, or will you stand with Harold Pritchard and his vision of what this church should be?" Before Pastor Webb could answer, Harold Pritchard appeared in the doorway. "Gentlemen, we really need to get started. The cameraman has a schedule to keep, and people are getting anxious." Michael looked at Pastor Webb one more time, then walked back into the sanctuary. The moment he appeared, applause erupted throughout the building. People stood up, cheering and clapping as if he had just won another championship. Michael walked slowly to the front of the church, his children following behind him with confused expressions. They had never seen anything like this reaction before. Harold Pritchard took the microphone and began his prepared remarks. "Ladies and gentlemen, families and friends, today is a historic day for Grace Community Church. Today we honor one of the greatest athletes who ever lived, a man who has blessed us with his presence, his generosity, and his commitment to our church family." Michael stood at the front, watching the faces in the congregation. Some people looked genuinely happy. Others seemed uncomfortable with the spectacle. Mrs. Coleman sat in her usual spot, shaking her head sadly. Harold continued his speech, talking about Michael's achievements, his wealth, his global fame. He presented him with a plaque, naming him honorary deacon for life, and announced that the church was planning to name their new fellowship hall the Jordan Center. Through it all, Michael remained silent, his expression unreadable. Finally, Harold handed him the microphone. And now, let's hear from the man himself, Michael Jordan. The congregation erupted in applause again, clearly expecting a gracious acceptance speech from their newly celebrated member. Michael took the microphone and looked out at all the eager faces staring back at him. In the back, he could see the TV camera recording everything. What he said next would either heal this church or expose its fundamental hypocrisy to the world. And whatever he chose, his children would be watching, learning what their father believed about grace, dignity, and the true meaning of Christian love. Michael stood at the front of Grace Community Church, holding the microphone in his steady hands. The sanctuary was completely silent, except for the quiet hum of the TV camera. 200 faces stared back at him with expectant smiles, waiting for his gracious acceptance of their belated welcome. He looked at his children sitting in the front row. Marcus had his hands folded tightly in his lap, his young face serious beyond his years. Jasmine clutched her small purse, the same one she had carried on their very first Sunday when she had been so excited to visit a new church. In the third row, Mrs. Coleman sat with tears already forming in her eyes. She knew what was coming. Michael cleared his throat and began to speak. "Thank you for this warm welcome this morning." His voice was calm, measured, carrying easily through the sanctuary without him needing to raise it. "Before I respond to Mr. Pritchard's kind words, I'd like to tell you about someone very important to me." The congregation settled in, expecting to hear about his basketball career or his business ventures. "My mother is recovering from a heart attack in a Chicago hospital right now. She's 73 years old, and she raised me by herself after my father died when I was young. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on our table and clothes on my back. She never missed a parent-teacher conference, never failed to encourage me when things got difficult, and never let me believe that other people's opinions of me mattered more than my own character." People shifted slightly in their seats. This wasn't the story they had expected. "When I was a boy, my mother and I visited many churches. In some of them we were welcomed with open arms. In others, we were made to feel like outsiders. My mother taught me that you can learn everything you need to know about people by watching how they treat someone who they think can do nothing for them." Harold Pritchard's smile was beginning to fade. "My children and I have been attending Grace Community Church for 3 months. During that time, we've sat in these pews every Sunday, listening to sermons about loving your neighbor, welcoming strangers, and seeing Christ in everyone you meet." Michael paused, his eyes moving slowly across the congregation. "Some of you lived up to those beautiful words." He nodded toward Mrs. Coleman. "Mrs. Ruth Coleman welcomed us from our very first day. She invited us to fellowship meals, made sure my children felt included, and showed us what Christian love really looks like." Mrs. Coleman wiped her eyes with a tissue. "But others of you—" Michael's voice remained gentle, but there was steel underneath it now. "Others of you saw a black father with 2 children, and you decided we didn't quite fit. You thought we might be more comfortable somewhere else. You looked right through us as if we were invisible." The sanctuary was so quiet that people could hear their own heartbeats. "Pastor Webb, when my family first visited this church, you welcomed other guests by name, asked about their families, made them feel special, but when we approached you after service, you couldn't wait to get away from us. Week after week, you recognized every visitor except us." Pastor Webb's face had gone completely pale. Mr. Pritchard, you organized meetings to discuss how to limit my family's involvement in church activities. You were concerned that we might disrupt your traditions, change your comfortable routines. Harold opened his mouth to protest, but Michael continued. And now, this morning, you want to celebrate me. You want to name fellowship halls after me and make me an honorary deacon. But the man you're honoring today is exactly the same person who sat in your back pews for months while you ignored him. Michael looked directly at the TV camera. My name is Michael Jeffrey Jordan. I played basketball professionally for many years. Some people know who I am because of that. But my children and I didn't come to Grace Community Church because I'm famous. We came because we were looking for a church family. We came hoping to find people who would welcome us, simply because we're human beings, children of God, neighbors in need of community. He turned back to the congregation. Instead, we found people who could only see our worth after they learned I was a celebrity. We found a church that preaches love but practices conditional acceptance. Several people in the congregation were crying now. Others looked ashamed. A few, including Harold Pritchard, just looked angry. You want to know what my mother told me this week while she was lying in that hospital bed? She said, Michael, you can learn everything you need to know about a person by watching how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. For 3 months, you thought I could do nothing for you. And in those moments, when you believed I was powerless, some of you showed me exactly who you really are. Michael's voice grew stronger, more passionate, but never lost its control. I organized your carnival, not because I wanted recognition, but because this church needed help and I was able to provide it. I fixed your roof, repaired your van, and donated supplies because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected praise. He held up the plaque Harold had presented to him. This beautiful award says Honorary Deacon for Life. But honorary positions are for people who don't really belong. They're for outsiders, who you want to honor without actually including them. I don't want to be an honorary anything. I wanted to be a regular member of a church family that loved me for who I am, not who I'm famous for being. Michael looked at his children again. They were watching him with pride and sadness mixed together on their young faces. My children have learned some hard lessons in this sanctuary. They've learned that some adults judge people by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. They've learned that some people's kindness depends on what you can do for them, but they've also learned something more important. His voice became gentle again. They've learned that their father won't change who he is based on how others treat him. They've learned that dignity isn't something other people can give you or take away. It's something you carry inside yourself. And they've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting bad behavior, but it does mean not letting other people's failures make you bitter. Michael set the microphone down on the podium and walked back to his children. Daddy, Jasmine whispered, are we leaving now? Yes, sweetheart. We're leaving now. As they walked toward the back of the church, the sanctuary remained completely silent. No one seemed to know what to say or do. But then, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Coleman stood up. Her weathered hands shook slightly, but her voice was strong and clear. Shame on us, she said, her words carrying through the silent sanctuary. Shame on every one of us who made that good man and his beautiful children feel unwelcome in God's house. She looked around at her fellow congregation members. I've been a member of this church for 42 years. I've seen 3 pastors come and go. I've watched this community grow and change, but I have never been more embarrassed to call myself a member of Grace Community Church than I am right now. Other people began to stir. Margaret Henderson stood up next. Mrs. Coleman is right. I'm ashamed of how we treated the Jordan family. I'm ashamed of how I treated them. One by one, other members of the congregation began to stand. Not the board members or the wealthy donors, but the working families, the elderly members, the young parents with children. "We were wrong," called out Emma's mother, the woman whose daughter had wanted to befriend Jasmine. "We failed them," said another voice. "We failed ourselves," said a third. Soon, nearly half the congregation was standing. Some were crying. Others were speaking words of genuine remorse and regret. Pastor Webb, still pale and shaken, stepped forward. "Michael, please wait." Michael turned back, his children close beside him. "I don't deserve to ask anything of you," Pastor Webb said, his voice breaking. "But please let me say this in front of everyone." He faced the congregation. "I have been your pastor for 12 years. I have preached hundreds of sermons about love, acceptance, and Christian fellowship. But when the opportunity came to live those words, I failed completely. I failed Michael and his children. I failed this congregation. And I failed God." Pastor Webb removed his collar and placed it on the front pew. "I don't deserve to wear this anymore. I forgot the most basic principle of our faith, that every person who enters this sanctuary is a beloved child of God, deserving of love and respect regardless of their race, their wealth, or their fame." He looked directly at Michael. "You showed us what grace looks like. You helped our church when we had rejected you. You served us when we had ignored you. You forgave us when we deserved judgment. That's not just kindness, that's the love of Christ in action." Michael stood quietly, his children watching this unprecedented display of confession and remorse. Finally he spoke. "Pastor Webb, I appreciate your words. I appreciate everyone who has stood up today. But apologies, even sincere ones, don't erase the hurt that my children have experienced in this place." He looked around the sanctuary one more time. "My family will not be returning to Grace Community Church, not because I don't forgive you, I forgive you complete, but because true change takes time, and my children need to know that their father values their dignity too much to put them back in a situation where they might face rejection again." Michael walked to the back of the church with his children. At the doors, he turned around one final time. "I hope this church becomes everything God intended it to be. I hope you learn to welcome the next family that looks different, speaks differently, or comes from a different background. I hope you remember that the test of a church isn't how it treats its celebrities, but how it treats its strangers." He paused. "And I hope my children remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is walk away with your dignity intact, knowing you tried to do the right thing even when others couldn't see your worth." As the Jordan family walked through the doors of Grace Community Church for the last time, they left behind a congregation that would never be the same. Some would learn from this experience and become better people. Others would remain unchanged. But everyone would remember the Sunday when Michael Jordan taught them the difference between fame and character, between celebrity and worth. And two children would remember the day their father showed them what it meant to stand up for yourself with grace, to forgive without compromising your dignity, and to walk away from a bad situation while still believing in the possibility that people can change. The lesson wasn't about basketball or fame or wealth. It was about the courage to be yourself in a world that often wants you to be someone else, and the wisdom to know when it's time to find people who will love you for exactly who you are. The ride home from Grace Community Church was quiet. Michael drove slowly through the tree-lined streets of Millbrook while his children sat in the back seat, processing everything they had just witnessed. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "Daddy, did we do the right thing by leaving?" Michael pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine. Instead of going straight into the house, he turned around to face his children. "What do you think, son?" I think some of those people really meant it when they said they were sorry." Mrs. Coleman was crying. And Pastor Webb looked really sad. "You're right. Some of them did mean it. And that makes me happy, because it means they learned something important today." "But we still left," Jasmine pointed out, "even though they apologized." Michael nodded. Sometimes saying sorry isn't enough to fix what's broken. Sometimes people need to prove they've really changed before you can trust them again. How would they prove it? Marcus asked. By how they treat the next family that visits their church. By whether they welcome people because they're human beings, not because they think those people might be famous or important. They went inside and sat together on the living room couch. Michael knew his children needed to understand what had happened and why. I want to tell you something important, he began. What we experienced at Grace Community Church happens to many people in many places. Sometimes people judge others by the color of their skin, sometimes by how much money they think they have, sometimes by where they come from or how they dress. That's not fair, Jasmine said firmly. No, it's not fair. But here's what I learned from your grandmother, and what I hope you learned today. You can't control how other people act, but you can control how you respond. How did we respond? Marcus asked. With dignity. We never let their bad behavior make us act badly. We helped when we could. We were kind even when they weren't kind to us. And when it became clear that they couldn't see our worth, we walked away with our heads held high. Michael pulled both children closer to him on the couch. Do you know what I'm most proud of? They shook their heads. I'm proud that you both wanted to keep going back, even when other kids were mean to you. I'm proud that you saw Mrs. Coleman's kindness and appreciated it. And I'm proud that you watched your father stand up for what's right, even when it was hard. Are we going to find a new church? Jasmine asked. Yes, we are. And this time we'll find one where people welcome us from the first day, not because they know who I used to be, but because they understand that every person deserves love and respect. The phone started ringing almost immediately after they got home. News of Michael's speech at Grace Community Church was spreading quickly through Millbrook and beyond. The local TV station had aired clips during their noon broadcast, and social media was buzzing with reactions. Michael ignored most of the calls, but he did answer when Mrs. Coleman called that evening. Michael, honey, how are you and the children doing? We're fine, Ruth. How are things at the church? Mrs. Coleman sighed deeply. It's been quite an afternoon. After you left, people didn't know what to do with themselves. Some folks left right away, embarrassed by what happened. Others stayed and talked for hours about what they learned today. And Pastor Webb? He's taking some time to think and pray. I believe what happened today changed him deeply. Whether it's enough to save his ministry here, I don't. What about Harold Pritchard? Harold's furious, of course. He's telling anyone who will listen that you are ungrateful and dramatic. But most people aren't buying it anymore. They saw through his scheme today. Michael wasn't surprised. Men like Harold Pritchard rarely accepted responsibility for their actions. Ruth, I want you to know that leaving Grace Community doesn't mean I'm giving up on the people there. Some of you, like yourself, showed us real Christian love. That matters more than you know. You're a good man, Michael Jordan, a better man than we deserved. Over the next few days, the story of what happened at Grace Community Church spread far beyond Millbrook. National news outlets picked up the story. Social media exploded with discussions about race, religion, and how churches should treat visitors. Michael received interview requests from major television shows, calls from publishers wanting him to write a book about the experience, and invitations to speak at conferences about faith and social justice. He turned them all down. Daddy, Marcus asked on Wednesday evening, why don't you want to talk to the TV people? Don't you want everyone to know what happened? The people who need to learn from this already know what happened, Michael replied. I don't need to be on television to teach lessons about treating people with dignity. Those lessons are taught every day, in small moments, by how we choose to treat each other. On Thursday, something unexpected happened. Michael answered the doorbell to find a young family standing on his front porch. A white father, a Hispanic mother, and two mixed-race children who looked to be about Marcus and Jasmine's ages. "Mr. Jordan, I'm David Martinez, and this is my wife Sarah and our children Alex and Sophia. We heard about what happened at Grace Community Church." Michael invited them in, curious about why they had come. "We moved to Millbrook 6 months ago," Sarah explained. "We've been looking for a church, but we've had some difficult experiences. When we heard your speech on the news, we realized we weren't alone. It gave us hope," David added. "Not because of who you are, but because of what you said about dignity and finding people who will accept you as you are." Little Sophia, who looked to be about Jasmine's age, spoke up shyly. "My mom said you have kids. Do they want to be friends?" Marcus and Jasmine looked at their father hopefully. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Michael said. "Why don't you all stay for dinner, and we can talk about finding a church together?" That evening, as the two families shared a meal and their children played in the backyard, Michael realized something important. His experience at Grace Community Church, painful as it had been, had led him to people who truly understood what he and his children had gone through. On Sunday morning, instead of attending Grace Community Church, Michael and his children joined the Martinez family at New Hope Community Church across town. The pastor, a young black woman named Reverend Patricia Williams, greeted every visitor personally, learned their names and made them feel genuinely welcome. During the service, Reverend Williams spoke about loving your neighbor in practical, everyday ways. She talked about seeing Christ in every person who walked through the doors, regardless of their background, their race, or their circumstances. After the service, several families approached Michael and his children, not because they recognized him as a famous basketball player, but because they wanted to welcome the new family and invite them to upcoming church activities. "Daddy," Jasmine whispered as they walked to their car, "these people are really nice." "Yes, they are, sweetheart. This is what church is supposed to feel like." Marcus tugged on Michael's sleeve. "Dad, do you think the people at our old church learned anything from what happened?" Michael thought about Mrs. Coleman, about Pastor Webb's broken expression, about the congregation members who had stood up to acknowledge their failures. "I think some of them did, son, and I hope they'll do better with the next family that needs their welcome." As they drove home from New Hope Community Church, Michael reflected on the journey his family had been through. The pain of rejection had been real, but it had also taught his children valuable lessons about dignity, perseverance, and the importance of standing up for what's right. More importantly, it had led them to a church community that welcomed them not because of Michael's fame, but because they understood that every person is valuable in God's eyes. That afternoon, while his children played with their new friends from the Martinez family, Michael received one final call about the Grace Community Church incident. "Mr. Jordan, this is Jonathan Pierce from the Charlotte Observer. I'm writing a follow-up story about your experience at Grace Community Church. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?" Michael thought for a moment, watching his children laugh and play in the sunshine. "Yes," he said finally. "I'd like people to know that this story isn't really about me or my family. It's about every person who has ever felt unwelcome, overlooked, or judged in a place where they were seeking acceptance and community. What do you hope people learn from what happened?" "I hope they learn that love isn't conditional. I hope they learn that you can't claim to follow Christ's teachings while treating some people as less worthy than others. And I hope they learn that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is to see them, really see them, for who they are rather than who you think they should be." Michael paused, listening to his children's laughter. "Most importantly, I hope other families who are facing rejection or discrimination will understand that their worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. They are valuable exactly as they are, and somewhere out there are people who will recognize that value and welcome them with open arms." As Michael hung up the phone, he knew that the painful experience at Grace Community Church had ended exactly as it should have. His children had learned that dignity was something you carried inside yourself, that forgiveness didn't require accepting bad treatment, and that walking away from a harmful situation wasn't giving up. It was choosing to value yourself enough to find better. The real victory wasn't in changing the minds of people who couldn't see their worth. The real victory was in teaching his children to never let anyone else's blindness dim their own light. And in a small church across town, they had found a community that understood that lesson from the very beginning. 3 weeks after Michael's speech at Grace Community Church, Pastor Harrison Webb sat in his empty office staring at a letter of resignation he had written and rewritten a dozen times. The words never seemed right, but the decision was clear. He couldn't continue as pastor of a church where he had failed so completely to live up to his calling. The Sunday after Michael left, only half the usual congregation had shown up for service. Some people were too embarrassed to face their neighbors. Others were angry about the media attention. A few had left permanently, following Harold Pritchard to a different church across the county. But something unexpected was happening to those who remained. Mrs. Coleman knocked on his office door, carrying a tray with coffee and her famous chocolate chip cookies. "Pastor Webb, you look like you haven't eaten in days." "I don't have much appetite lately, Mrs. Coleman." She set the tray down and settled into the chair across from his desk. "You know, in 42 years of attending this church, I've never seen people pray as hard as they've been praying these past few weeks." Pastor Webb looked up from his resignation letter. Praying for what? For forgiveness, for wisdom, for the courage to become the kind of people they thought they already were. She reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of handwritten notes. "These are letters from church members. Letters they've written but haven't sent. To Michael Jordan, to each other, to God." Margaret Henderson wrote a 3-page apology to that little girl, Jasmine. "Bob Morrison wants to personally apologize to Marcus for his son's behavior." Pastor Webb took the letters and flipped through them. Page after page of genuine remorse, self-reflection, and determination to do better. "Mrs. Coleman, these are beautiful, but they're also too late. The Jordan family is gone. We lost our chance to show them love." "Maybe," she said quietly, "but we haven't lost our chance to show love to the next family, or the family after that." She leaned forward in her chair. "Pastor, I've been thinking about what Michael said, about how the test of a church isn't how it treats celebrities, but how it treats strangers. What if this whole painful experience was God's way of preparing us for something bigger?" "What do you mean? What if the Jordan family was never meant to stay here permanently? What if they were meant to be teachers, showing us exactly what we needed to learn before we could become the church God wants us to be?" Pastor Webb had never thought about it that way. "You think Michael knew this would happen?" "I think that young man is wise beyond his years, and I think he understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell people the truth about themselves, even when it hurts." That afternoon, Pastor Webb walked through downtown Millbrook, thinking about Mrs. Coleman's words. As he passed the coffee shop, he saw a familiar figure sitting alone at a corner table. Harold Pritchard looked up as Pastor Webb approached. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "Harold, how are you doing?" "Not well, Pastor. Not well at all." Pastor Webb sat down across from him. "What's troubling you?" Harold laughed bitterly. "Everything. My reputation in this town is ruined. People look at me like I'm some kind of villain. My own wife barely speaks to me." "What does your wife think about what happened?" "She thinks I'm a fool. She says I had a chance to know one of the most famous people in the world, and instead of treating him with basic human decency, I turned him into an enemy." Harold stirred his coffee absently. "But you know what bothers me most? It's not that I failed to recognize Michael Jordan. It's that I failed to recognize a good man and his children who just wanted to belong somewhere. Pastor Webb was surprised by Harold's honesty. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I can't undo what I did. I can't take back the things I said or the way I treated them. What kind of man organizes a campaign to push a family out of church, then tries to celebrate them when he learns they're famous? A human man, Pastor Webb said gently. A flawed man who made mistakes and is now facing the consequences. Is there such a thing as forgiveness for someone like me? Pastor Webb thought about his own failures, his own guilt over the past months. Harold, I ignored that family for weeks. I looked right through them as if they were invisible. I preached about loving neighbors while failing to see the neighbors sitting in my own sanctuary. If there's forgiveness for me, there's forgiveness for you too. But how do I live with myself? How do I face people in this town? The same way the rest of us do, by admitting we were wrong, by trying to do better, and by proving that we've learned something from our failures. That evening, Pastor Webb called an emergency congregation meeting. About 60 people showed up, not the full membership, but those who were still committed to figuring out how to move forward. I want to start, Pastor Webb said, by reading something to you. He pulled out a letter from the stack Mrs. Coleman had given him. This is from Janet Morrison. She wrote, "Dear Pastor Webb, I have been a member of Grace Community Church for 15 years. In all that time, I thought I was a good Christian woman, but the way I treated the Jordan family showed me how much I still need to learn about love, acceptance, and seeing Christ in others. I failed those children, and I failed myself. How do we make sure this never happens again?" He looked around the room. Janet isn't here tonight because she's too embarrassed to face all of you. But her question is the right question. How do we make sure this never happens again? Margaret Henderson raised her hand. "Pastor, I've been thinking about this every day since Michael left. I think we need to do more than just feel sorry. We need to change how we do things. What do you suggest?" New member orientation. Not just for new members, but for all of us. Training about welcoming people who are different from us. Maybe we need to partner with churches in other communities, churches that are more diverse than ours. An older man named Frank Sullivan spoke up. "My grandson asked me why we were mean to the black family at church. I didn't know what to tell him. Our children were watching everything we did. What did we teach them? That's exactly why we need to change," said Maria Santos, one of the few Hispanic members of the congregation. "My family has been attending here for 2 years, and honestly, we felt some of the same coldness that the Jordan family experienced. We just didn't have the courage to say anything." Pastor Webb felt his heart sink. "Maria, I had no idea." "Of course you didn't. Because you weren't looking for it. Just like you weren't looking for the signs that the Jordan family needed a warmer welcome." The conversation continued for 2 hours. People shared their own experiences of feeling excluded or unwelcome in various situations. They talked about unconscious biases, about the difference between being polite and being truly welcoming, about how to create a church culture where everyone felt valued. By the end of the evening, they had developed a plan. Grace Community Church would partner with 3 other churches in the region for joint services and community events. They would start a formal greeter training program. They would create a committee specifically focused on welcome and inclusion, with Maria Santos as its chair. Most importantly, they would invite Michael Jordan back, not for a celebration or recognition, but for a conversation about how the church could do better. "Pastor," said Mrs. Coleman as people were leaving, "do you really think he'll come back to talk with us?" "I don't know, but we have to try. We owe him that much." The next morning, Pastor Webb called Michael's number, his hands shaking slightly as he dialed. "Hello, Pastor Webb." Michael's voice was neutral but not unfriendly. "Michael, thank you for taking my call. I want to ask you something, and I'll understand completely if you say no. What is it? Would you be willing to come back to Grace Community Church? Not for a service, not for any kind of public event, just to meet with our leadership team and help us understand how to do better. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Pastor Webb, why would you want me to do that? Because we're trying to change, really change. And we can't do that without understanding exactly how we failed and what it felt like to be on the receiving end of our failures. Another pause. Will Harold Pritchard be there? Only if you're comfortable with that. This is about learning, not about making anyone feel attacked or defensive. Let me think about it. I'll call you back tomorrow. That night, Michael talked with his children about Pastor Webb's request. They want you to go back, Marcus asked with surprise. Not to attend church, just to talk with them about how they can treat people better. Are you going to do it? Jasmine wanted to know. Michael thought about his mother's words about grace, about giving people what they need rather than what they deserve. I'm not sure yet. What do you think I should do? Both children were quiet for a moment. Finally, Marcus spoke up. I think if they really want to learn how to be nicer to people, maybe you should help them, even though they were mean to us. But only if you want to, Daddy, Jasmine added. You don't have to help people who hurt us. Michael smiled at his children's wisdom. They understood both justice and mercy, both the right to protect yourself and the power of helping others grow. The next morning he called Pastor Webb back. I'll come, he said, but I have conditions. Of course, what do you need? This conversation happens once. I'm not going to be your consultant on race relations or your diversity expert. I'll share my perspective on what happened, but after that, the work is yours to do. Understood? And if I get the sense that this is just another publicity opportunity or a way to make yourselves feel better without actually changing, I'll leave immediately. That's fair. When do you want to meet? Would this Saturday afternoon work? We could meet in the fellowship hall, just our leadership team. I'll be there. As Michael hung up the phone, he wondered if he was making the right choice. Grace Community Church had hurt his family deeply. They had shown him their worst selves when they thought he couldn't help them, but they were also asking for help in becoming better. And if there was a chance that his painful experience could prevent other families from facing the same rejection, maybe it was worth one more conversation. Besides, his mother had always taught him that grace wasn't about giving people what they deserved. Grace was about giving people what they needed to grow. Saturday afternoon arrived with an autumn chill in the air. Michael drove through Millbrook's familiar streets one last time, noting how different everything looked now. The same oak trees lined the same sidewalks, but his perspective had changed completely. Grace Community Church's parking lot was nearly empty when he arrived. Only a few cars sat near the fellowship hall entrance. Pastor Webb's sedan, Mrs. Coleman's old Honda, and a couple of others he recognized from Sunday mornings. Michael sat in his car for a moment, remembering the first time he had pulled into this parking lot with his children. They had been so hopeful that day, so excited about finding a new church family. Now they were settled happily at New Hope Community Church, where Jasmine sang in the children's choir and Marcus had joined the youth basketball team. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Good luck, Dad. Remember what Grandma said about grace? Michael smiled. His mother was now staying with them while she recovered, and she had become the children's favorite source of wisdom about handling difficult situations. The fellowship hall looked different too. Instead of the long tables usually set up for church meals, a circle of chairs had been arranged in the center of the room. About 12 people were waiting for him: Pastor Webb, Miss Coleman, Maria Santos, Margaret Henderson, and several others he recognized. Harold Pritchard was not among them. Michael, Pastor Webb stood up as he entered. Thank you for coming. Pastor Webb. Michael shook his hand. noting how the pastor's grip was steadier than it had been weeks ago. "Where's Mr. Pritchard?" Harold chose not to participate. He said he wasn't ready for this kind of conversation. Michael nodded. He wasn't surprised. Some people needed more time to face their failures than others. "Before we begin," Michael said, "I want to be clear about why I'm here. I'm not here to make you feel better about what happened. I'm not here to absolve you of responsibility. I'm here because you asked for help in understanding how to do better. And I believe people deserve the chance to grow." "We understand," said Maria Santos, "and we appreciate you giving us this opportunity." Michael took a seat in the circle. For the next hour, he answered their questions with painful honesty. "What was it like when Pastor Webb didn't acknowledge your family during visitor recognition?" "It was like being invisible. My daughter had raised her hand, so excited to be welcomed. When the pastor looked right through us, I watched her face fall. She couldn't understand why we weren't worth acknowledging." "How did it feel when the children started treating Marcus and Jasmine badly?" "Like my heart was being ripped out." As a parent, your job is to protect your children from harm. But you can't protect them from learning that some people will judge them before they even know their names. "Why did you keep coming back week after week?" "Because I wanted to teach my children that you don't give up when things get hard. I wanted them to see that their worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. And honestly, I kept hoping that if we were patient enough, kind enough, helpful enough, some of you would eventually see us as human beings, deserving of basic respect." Margaret Henderson wiped tears from her eyes. "Michael, I owe you a personal apology. My granddaughter Emma wanted to be friends with Jasmine, but I discouraged it. I told her to wait and see if your family would fit in with our church community." "What were you afraid would happen if they became friends?" Margaret struggled with her answer. I was afraid that having diverse friendships would complicate Emma's life, that other families might not approve, that it might cause conflict in the church. So you chose adult comfort over children's friendship?" "Yes. And I was wrong. I robbed both girls of a chance to know each other, and I taught Emma that friendship should be based on what other people think, rather than on genuine connection." The conversation continued, with each person sharing their own moments of failure and asking for Michael's perspective. Pastor Webb talked about his fear of confronting influential church members. Santos described feeling like she had to make herself small and invisible to avoid causing problems. "Here's what I learned from this experience," Michael said as the formal discussion began to wind down. "A church, any organization really, is only as inclusive as its most exclusive members allow it to be. If you let people like Harold Pritchard set the tone for how newcomers are treated, then you're not really a welcoming community. You're a club that occasionally lets in new members when the existing members approve." "How do we change that?" Pastor Webb asked. "You change it by making inclusion a core value, not just a nice idea. You train your greeters specifically to watch for families who might be feeling left out. You create systems to ensure every visitor is personally welcomed. You teach your children that friendship isn't about finding people who look like them, but about finding people who share their values of kindness and respect." "And what about people like Harold?" asked another board member. "People who resist change." Michael was quiet for a moment. "You love them, but you don't let them control the direction of your community. Sometimes loving someone means telling them that their behavior is unacceptable, even if they don't like hearing it." As the meeting concluded, Pastor Webb walked Michael to his car. "Michael, I have one more question, if you don't mind." "What's that?" "Do you think Grace Community Church can really change? Or are we too set in our ways?" Michael looked back at the church building, thinking about all the Sunday mornings he had spent in those pews with his children. "Pastor Webb, I think any group of people can change if they're willing to do the hard work. But change isn't just about feeling bad about past mistakes. It's about creating new systems, new habits, new ways of thinking that make it impossible to repeat those mistakes. What would convince you that we had really changed? I wouldn't be convinced by apologies or promises. I'd be convinced by seeing how you treat the next family that doesn't look like your current congregation. The next single mother with children. The next immigrant family. The next people who walk through your doors, hoping to find acceptance and community. Pastor Webb nodded. That's fair. There's something else. Michael continued. Real change means you'll have to be willing to lose some members. Some people will leave rather than embrace a more inclusive community. Are you prepared for that? We've already lost some members. Harold took about 15 families with him to Fellowship Baptist. But the people who stayed, they're committed to doing better. Then you have a chance. As Michael drove away from Grace Community Church for what he knew would be the last time, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Not hope that he and his family would ever return. They had found their church home at New Hope Community, where they were valued from day one. But hope that the pain his family had experienced might prevent other families from facing the same rejection. 6 months later, Michael received a letter from Pastor Webb. Grace Community Church had welcomed 3 new families of color over the past few months. They had partnered with a Spanish-speaking congregation for joint services. They had started a community food bank that served families regardless of their church membership or background. Most importantly, they had developed what they called the Jordan Family Protocol, a systematic approach to ensuring that every visitor, especially those who might feel different or out of place, received multiple personal welcomes and invitations to participate in church activities. The letter included photos from their recent community service day, where church members had worked alongside people from all backgrounds to clean up a local park. In one photo, Michael recognized Mrs. Coleman painting a picnic table beside a young Hispanic woman and her children. At the bottom of the letter, Pastor Webb had written, "We still have work to do, but we're not the same church you left. Thank you for caring enough to tell us the truth about ourselves." That evening, Michael showed the letter to his children as they sat on their front porch, the same porch where they had made the decision to keep attending Grace Community Church, despite the rejection they faced. "Look at that," Marcus said, pointing to the photos. "They really did change." "Some of them did," Michael corrected gently. "Change is always a choice, and different people make different choices about whether they want to grow. Are you happy that we helped them learn to be better?" Jasmine asked. Michael thought about her question. "I'm happy that other families won't have to go through what we went through. I'm proud that we handled a difficult situation with dignity, and I'm grateful that our painful experience led us to New Hope Community, where we found the church family we were looking for all along." "Do you think we'll ever see those people again?" "Maybe. Millbrook isn't that big a town, but if we do, I hope we'll see people who learn something important about love, acceptance, and what it really means to welcome strangers." As the sun set behind the oak trees, Michael reflected on the journey his family had taken. They had sought a church home and found rejection. They had offered service and received coldness. They had extended grace and been met with prejudice. But they had also discovered their own strength, their own worth, and their own capacity to respond to hatred with dignity. His children had learned that their value didn't depend on other people's opinions. They had learned to stand up for themselves while still believing in the possibility of human goodness. Most importantly, they had learned that walking away from a bad situation wasn't giving up. It was choosing to value yourself enough to find better. And in a small church across town, they had found exactly what they had been looking for from the beginning, a community that welcomed them. Not because they had to prove their worth, but because their worth was obvious from the moment they walked through the doors. The test had never been about whether Grace Community Church would accept the Jordan family. The test had been about whether the Jordan family would remember their own value when others failed to see it. They had passed that test with flying colors. And in doing so, they had taught everyone watching, including 2 children who would carry these lessons for the rest of their lives, what it really means to be champions of dignity, grace, and unconditional love. That's the incredible story of how Michael Jordan taught an entire congregation the difference between fame and character, between celebrity and worth. His children learned that dignity isn't something others can give you or take away. It's something you carry inside yourself. What did you think of Michael's response? Would you have handled it the same way? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I love hearing from viewers all around the world. If this story touched your heart and reminded you about the importance of treating everyone with respect and kindness, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. When we share stories like this, we help spread kindness and understanding to people everywhere. And speaking of powerful stories that will inspire you, make sure to click on the video appearing on your screen right now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for listening, and remember, true champions aren't just made on the court or field. They're made when we choose to treat others with dignity, even when no one is watching. Until next time, keep spreading kindness.